So DJ, I got to ask. I mean, yeah, obviously we've talked a couple of times, but and I see in your background there you've got guitar. So are you indeed a musician as well?
Yeah, I mean that's not how I pay the bills, obviously, but yeah, there's music's always been part of my life, so very important.
Ah, good. Well, obviously living in Nashville, a lot of people are musicians. So and
Yeah, I would say less so in Nashville. I play for my church, and that's about as far as that goes.
oh yeah,
I let the
it's
pros take care of it here. Yeah.
well, I find it interesting. For those of you that are on the call, in case you don't know, DJ and I both happen to live in Nashville, Tennessee.
Yeah.
Um, and when you live here, depending on who you know, if you get to know people, you get to see a different side of the music industry, and it's rather interesting. I have a
Yeah.
friend who's a songwriter, and I will say a moderately successful songwriter. And so getting to hear the songs before they become songs, if you will, and the stories about how they become songs, it makes it much more interesting.
Yeah, there was a documentary that was made recently about the Nashville Songwriters that I really enjoyed because it actually lays out the process pretty well and exactly why I'm not a songwriter. I've got you can kind of see if I go like this, you see these binders. Those are
Mhm.
all songs that I've written over the years about almost oh good Lord, knocking on the door of 40 years worth of songs right there.
Wow.
Very few of them have seen the light of day. And that's the way it works. I mean that's nothing compared to the collections of some of these folks that are working on those things.
Well,
So yeah.
and again, this isn't part of the but hey, we're talking, so why not? So yeah, the friend that I have actually wrote a song that I won't go into great details, but I mean, it's probably one of the best songs he's ever written. And at this time he wrote the song, the publishing company that he was working with um, has a famous singer, and the singer heard the demo of the song and said, "That's my song,"
Yeah.
and she's never produced it. But yet, the song is on hold because he worked for that publishing company. So until she decides to either release it or actually produce it, that song is now tied up, and it's a shame because it's an incredible song.
Yeah, that happens. And there's some that I would really love to put out there to a wider audience. It's just, it wasn't really, well, back, 30 years ago, it definitely wasn't the time or the capability. I actually wanted to run my own record label at one point, and I kind of did. Starving Guitarist Records really was a thing. But yeah, now it'd be more thriving guitarist if it was anything. So
Well, and certainly, like I said, the friend of ours that's a songwriter, he's found during this whole COVID exercise, because all of the performers are now stuck at home, they're actually writing their own songs because they've got time to do it.
yeah,
So,
no, it's true.
so for those that are just simply songwriters, I don't want to say simple songwriters, but simply songwriters, it makes it
Hmm.
much more difficult because now they're competing with the artists themselves as well.
Yeah, and honestly, the best songs that you hear on the radio and whatever that get made into actual songs, they're always collaborations these days. I mean,
Yeah.
very rarely do you have any kind of a hit song or anything like that that is written by the actual artists themselves. Even if they participate, very rarely is it all them. So it's a collaborative effort these days. Yeah, it's big business, and it's a business like anything else. Like you have to treat it like that. And the fact that I just wasn't really willing to participate in a business for that, it was more an expression piece for me. That's why I had to bow out of the music industry about 20 years ago. I just decided that I wasn't the right fit for me. So
Yeah,
yeah,
well, I mean, but the good news is, again, we're fortunate that we live in a geography where you can do it for fun and not have to worry about it, and take
yep,
advantage of the things. So, which is all good. So, all right, well, it's almost 5 after, so
yeah,
I guess we should probably go ahead and jump into this real quick. So, hello everybody. I'm Rich Severson. I'm the VP Solutions Engineering at Stratodesk, and this is one of those things that we're going to probably start doing as more of an ongoing kind of thing. We're going to have tech talks, and today We just happen to have DJ Eshelman with us. Many of you in the EU space know who DJ is, but for a moment, I'll pause and let DJ go ahead and introduce himself and talk about his book, because I know that's important to him as well.
Sure. My name is DJ Eshelman. I have been working in IT for a little over 20 years. Most of that being known for being what I call a quasi-independent consultant. Though I've been an entrepreneur and an independent consultant for a little over 10 years now. Some of my biggest clients have been people like Citrix Systems, and so participating in their consulting bench and things like that, and helping them develop their teams and things like that. So that's kind of how I'm most well known. I participated in the CTA program for a while. I was a leader of the CUGC groups. Started the one in Denver, and then when I moved here to Nashville, helped Patrick with the one here for several years. And so that is the biggest part of my background. And then I decided, you know what, I have all this knowledge, I might as well start teaching it as well. So I decided to write some books, create some courses, and that's where we are today.
Well, and, and actually, I should have given a little history about myself as well. I mean, I've been, much like you, I've been part of the end user computing, VDI, virtualization, infrastructure architecture for God, who knows how long. And actually, I looked it up the other day. So just a little bit of history. Back in 1994, when Larry Ellison stood in front of the world and said, there's going to be this thing called network computing, and he had the NCI, the NC1, I actually delivered that device to him. So
Okay.
that's how long I've been doing this, and I've been in the endpoint management area of EUC and VDI for quite a long time. So I've helped do a lot of deployments and those kinds of things. So, but anyways, enough about the history and all that kind of stuff. So besides the book and obviously the consulting's going well, and we've all been kind of stuck at home. So what else have you been up to lately, DJ?
I tell you, my focus really has been twofold right now. One is, finding ways to inspire people to not only have hope, but to improve themselves, and providing the means to do so. And so last year, I published these two books, Be a Citrix Hero and Just Do This, Simpler Way to Succeed in IT. But also, we have the Thrivecast, which is a YouTube series that Jeff Pitch and I did. 46 episodes, I believe. Let me pull up the number. I think but yeah, 46 episodes that we did over the course of a year, about every week. And so that was most of those episodes. We brought somebody in to hang out with us for an hour or so and talk about their life and their IT career, but it was really more about them as people and not as much about just, hey, come present on this topic. And so that has really unlocked a lot of discussions among the IT community and things like that. We're starting to see a lot more of that going on as in general, of people just, okay, yeah, we get it. There's technology out there. Let's talk about our careers. Let's talk about the things that are going on in our lives, and be actually people in IT instead of just IT people.
Well, yeah, and it's funny. I mean, again, having done this for so long, I mean, there's people that have been part of my career, peripheral, either competitors and or working on projects with them and those kinds of things. And and it's interesting because even though we're a big community, when you look at, from the server side, when you look at from the software side, the virtualization, the endpoints, I mean, we're a big community, but at the same standpoint, it's not really that big. I mean, you're going to see people that you've worked with, you've communicated with. I mean, I can look on the list here of people that are participating. And as we just, briefly started up, Yark and I worked together at N Computing for probably almost 15 years, so you're going to run into people that you see and know, and it is about the community. And at the same standpoint, getting to know each other. So when we see each other and we talk, we can have professional discussions as well as personal discussions, because it's important to, even though I know that you're knowledgeable about the space and all those kinds of things, it's important to know you as a person as well. So yeah,
Right.
it's really cool. So
yeah, and so then also, I mean, my Twitter handle is the Citrix the Citrix hoax. Oh my gosh, really? The Citrix coach. And so yeah, that's another area that I've been doing a lot of, not only in the technology world, but I very quickly found that I had more passion for coaching people through their careers and lives, and so been doing that. But to answer your question, I'm also been doing a lot of coaching of other entrepreneurs as well, and so that has been something that I've been doing quite a lot of. Just finished up the manuscript for a book that's going to be completely around that. So departure from the tech world completely about that, but there's been a lot of lessons that I've learned about, being in business for myself as well, that I'm now uh, in the process of bringing out to coach and teach people about that, in addition to what we've been doing in the technology world. So it's pretty exciting.
Well, and I think I cut you off, so I'm going to give you the opportunity to say it again because it's important that you get that information out there. So I'm going to give you the opportunity. I'm going to pause and let you say your Twitter handle again.
Oh, the Citrix coach is, yeah, not the
Okay.
Citrix hoax, the Citrix coach.
Although, you know what? Somebody should run out and create that today, right?
Hey, you know what? It happens. My old Twitter handle was the Zen Master, and I was actually, yeah, I kind of knew behind the scenes that they were changing the branding for that, and so I went out and grabbed this other handle.
Well, very good. So, well, so obviously, so everybody here is not just listening to you and I talk about personal things. So, what do you think? What's the current state of VDI today? I mean, obviously, uh, and I'm going to just give you a quick input that I received yesterday. I didn't find it surprising, but it I was pleased to hear that there's kind of more of a push to a hybrid, right? There's this period of time where everybody had big server farms and all those kinds of things, and obviously with the virtualization and those kinds of things. But now, seemingly, there's a push to more of a hybrid infrastructure where move as much as your stuff to the cloud as you can, kind of almost
Yeah,
eliminating hardware liability. So, what's your thoughts on that?
my thoughts on that have been amplified over the last few years, and that is that we see trends all the time. And yes, we are seeing more people that are doing more of a hybrid approach. But the thing where I want people to put down their pens and get eye contact with me on the screen right here is to hear this one thing when it comes to all this. It's not about you. All right. It's about your users, and it's about what their needs are. And so what we're finding is that we need to be adaptive to where they are. And that is a good reason to go with a hybrid environment. But it's not a good why to go to a hybrid environment for like cost saving things like that. It's like, that's not so great. But for adaptability and meeting users where they are, that is a good reason. And so if that's not a case with you, then that's not necessarily true. So like in healthcare, for example, we're starting to see a different kind of hybrid than we're used to. So we're seeing a focus on being a service provider within an IT department, where we haven't seen that before. It's something that actually Mark Templeton talked about that, almost 8 years ago now, that would be the trend, and it took a while, but now there's some hybridization that's going in even within organizations where they're actually just having to host their own cloud services basically to meet people where they are because they have more people that have to do things remotely. And so it's like, what are you going to do? Like, force them to install a receiver on their computer? Well, maybe that's not so great, but maybe just be able to ship them out an endpoint that's configurable from the cloud and can actually work. Okay, that might work a little better, but the point is we're not assuming that they have to be at the clinic or the office or whatever it is to work anymore. And so we've had to adapt IT to meet that need. But in other places too, there's still the traditional hosting is the only way to go. And so getting more focused on performance and kind of security has been much more of a focus, And so it really depends. But yeah, I'm seeing a lot more hybrid than anything else. Just different types of hybrid than we anticipated.
Well, and one of the things that we've seen, obviously being from the endpoint side of it, right, with the whole race to work from home, and like we spoke a couple weeks ago, I think it's a little bit more this year is going to be work from home better. To your
Yeah.
point about people having to enable people that are working from home, obviously everybody's most people have a PC at home. Then it's, do I want to use my home machine for my work? Does my employer allow me to use my home machine for work? Do they provision me something? Do I get a, kind of like the Stratodesk No Touch Go, a USB key that I plug in? And then you worry about, do they accidentally overwrite their Windows 10 laptop, and now you've got to solve that. I mean, so for us, it's been very fortunate to have the cloud extension piece where we can, like you said, once you get it out there, as long as you can manage it, you can provision it, whether their services are in the cloud or whether they're in the infrastructure, or more importantly, a lot of people it was in the infrastructure, but because of the scale that we had to be able to adopt to get to work from home, we've had to move CRM pieces or healthcare Epic or something like that to a cloud service, and now we've got to be able to reprovision that user, and to be able to do that from home has been important for us, and the ability to do that. And I think one of the things that we've been hearing from an endpoint, and I'm going to ask you from the server side, I imagine it's the same side there from the infrastructure side, because quite honestly I don't deal with deploying the infrastructure that much, but a lot of the noise that we've heard over the last couple of weeks has been just the lack of availability of hardware. People can't get chips. So components are disappearing. Not just, we talked to a vendor that said, we've been using XYZ thin clients for, months and months, if not years, and suddenly the audio chip's no longer available. And now we've got to switch vendor. So
yeah, there's a second wave of both, like hardware to the endpoint and in the data center. Both are constrained right now. And actually, there's a third component too. Any kind of high-end semiconductor for scientific or even graphics card uses, and there's a lot of constraints there. And so what that becomes is we have to take what we have and go further with it. And so in the infrastructure, this means that we can't just throw more at it. And I don't know if there's necessarily a constraint. We're talking about the hybrid part of this. I don't know if we've reached the constraint yet of seeing increased costs in like the public cloud providers, for example. But I think that's inevitable. It's a market like anything else. I think we're going to start seeing increase of costs because they can't get more hardware, so it becomes they have to do more out of that. And so I think we'll probably see some increased costs across the board, not just in hardware, but services as well. We'll probably see that. So what that means is we have to be smarter about what we're doing and optimize much more efficiently. And not knowing how to do it isn't an excuse anymore. It's just not.
Well, and I think that's going to again be part of the hybrid thing, right? Is because as companies find that they can't get hardware, they're just going to go to the cloud service providers and say, hey, I'm going to put the hardware liability on you. Just give me the resources. I need X storage, I need X compute power, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'll let you figure out where the heck the hardware is coming from.
Yeah, and it's really difficult because that doesn't always work. That's something that everybody needs to hear is that, going to the cloud is fine if you can exist in the cloud. It doesn't, just like anything, if your applications don't work well over network distance from the infrastructure. So if you have a database over here and then an app over here, and there's too much network latency between those, doesn't matter what it is, it's going to go badly. And so you can't just put something up in here in like Azure, for example, and have 60 milliseconds of latency between there and your data center and hope that application is going to work. And so little things like that have to be thought about. So you have the endpoint latency, sure, all that kind of stuff, but with the application, now we have applications being executed outside of their back-end infrastructure, and that doesn't usually work. And so it's better than it's ever been, but that doesn't matter. You can't beat, the speed of light problem that we call it. It's not literally speed of light, but you know what I mean? It's like there's an actual problem when it comes to that latency, and it gets bad in a hurry. And I think there's a lot of organizations that aren't thinking through these kind of things that are involved in that too, as far as getting performance out of these things.
And it's funny, you just made me think of something that I hadn't thought of before. But I wonder how many organizations are out there that, for whatever reason, they put an application, let's say in Amazon, right? So maybe they have their database in Amazon, and then, with this whole change, they said, okay, now we've got to come up with an end user compute solution. So we're going to go with WVD. So now they've got their desktops in Azure, but their applications are in Amazon.
Sure. Yeah, that can happen too, where they
You
just,
know,
yeah, it matters. Now, there's always ways to get around this, and you have to just get uh, to use another templatism to get designful about what you're doing. That's back from like 2014 or something like that, I think. But it's still true. I mean, it was true back in, like you mentioned, like with Larry Ellison back in the day, and it's true now. If we're not thinking first about our needs first and then building a good design, our implementation is going to stink, because it doesn't matter. You can have the best hardware in the world and the absolute class leading stuff. If you don't have a good design, there's always going to be something in that stream that's going to make it not be good. I mean, you're only ever as good as your weakest link. So it's just true.
well, and now, and it brings in the whole last mile part, right? With everybody now being forced to work from remote. And it's interesting because we see the migrations of people, people moving from, the big cities. I'm curious to see what Silicon Valley is going to look like, 18 months from now when it comes to, office facilities. And I mean, how many people are actually going to
Yeah.
continue to reside there? I mean, actually, you probably saw the news yesterday here for, again, DJ and I both live in Nashville. There was an announcement yesterday that Oracle is going to put in what is that, $850 million facility here, something like that. I mean,
Uh,
some ridiculous.
I actually did not see that, so that's interesting. Okay,
Yeah,
don't
the
doubt it.
Oracle. Yeah, they're going to develop the East Riverfront over by the stadium, and I forget the exact number, but I mean it's a ridiculous
Hmm,
number. I think something like 8,000 jobs. So yeah, so
interesting.
Oracle's moving to
Yeah.
Nashville, or at least part of Oracle's moving to Nashville. So
Right. I
um,
mean, it makes sense. There's a lot of reasons to. I mean, there's reasons I moved here, but there are different reasons for a lot of companies to move here too. But let's just say that there's some benefits to doing so. That I think being more mobile as a workforce unlocks that capability a lot more. So you can. I mean, we've seen so many people that are, well, we have whole new challenges now that um, I remember way back in the early 2000s when I first started working with Citrix. There were lawyers that I was working with that realized that they could go out in their wilderness home and use Starlink or whatever it was for internet from the satellite, and the Citrix would more or less work if I tuned it properly. And when I did, I didn't realize what was going to happen. I just thought I was just kind of playing around with it. I thought it was kind of cool to be able to do it. I didn't realize that they would start working from those locations and actually, start expecting that. Well, now we're here and we've got employees that are going to start expecting to be able to do work from anywhere. I think we're going to start seeing expectation of saying, if I can provide a stable 4G connection, I should be able to work from my camper van off in the Adirondacks or whatever. It's like if this then that kind of statements are going to be coming, I think. And so companies just need to be ready for what that's going to look like.
well, and like you said earlier, right? It's all you put all the infrastructure and everything together. It's all about the end user experience, right? And you know, obviously, in our careers, technology has improved and increased to where you can get 400 megabits down to your house. You can get 5G to your camper out in the middle of nowhere. Those kinds of things. So uh, you know, and again, I want to bring this back to Stratodesk just a little bit because there's a couple things I want to talk about. The fact that being able to provision those users regardless of where they are,
Yep.
you know, regardless of what the endpoint is, because quite frankly, we have the advantage that we don't care about that either, and just make the end user computing, make the end user's experience a better thing. Um, and from the IT perspective, we've got to make that better too. And so we're doing some things to introduce a couple of pieces. In fact, actually, one of the things I probably shouldn't say this, but we're going to be introducing multi-factor authentication into no touch, and that's something that a lot of people have been wanted as we move to the cloud. So I want to throw that bullet out for our developers. So that's something we're going to be have coming pretty quickly. So, anyways,
Nice.
and with that, DJ, I definitely want to give you a chance to talk about your book again real quick because I know that's important to you. So.
Oh, certainly, yeah. And it just so happens that this wasn't really planned, but it just so happens that the paperback version of Be a Citrix Hero was released to the world a year ago last week, and so
Anniversary, hey?
Yeah, so 1 year of this, and so it came up fast. I didn't realize a year would go by so fast, but so yeah, there's the premise of the book is actually based out of some presentations that I was doing back in 2017, 2018, and that was what I called the Dirty Dozen, and it was the things I was finding in uh, uh, consulting engagements where I'd be out there to assess or to find a design. There's always things that I found wrong. One of my mentors, Nick Renslin, always told me, he's like, there's always something wrong. Every single environment has something wrong. Your job is to go find it. I got really good at finding it. And so within a pretty short range of time, I had lots of recommendations. Well, I took about the previous 2 or so years of those recommendations, put them all in the spreadsheet. And so there's about 335 initially. That expanded to about 380 pretty quickly. So what I did was I categorized all those, counted them, and made it so that I found out the ones that we were recommending the most, and the things that were most common. Out of that, I took the things that I think were the highest impact and had those. And then out of those, I did the ones that were the easiest to solve of those high impact things. And that's what I called the Dirty Dozen. And so what I did in Be a Citrix Hero is say, okay, of those 12, what are the major things, the major themes that we can talk about? So they stacked a little bit, so that all those 12 biggest things that were the easiest to solve are all what I put in here. And so you have basically 6 chapters of knowledge as far as the tech stuff, and then the 7th chapter is more application kind of stuff. And I'm actually kind of like a preview of what became the book Just Do This, the second book I made. But really talking about, so there's a concept called the law of diminishing returns. And this is something that I really want, especially Citrix engineers, to hear, is that you can get really bogged down in the minutia of stuff and trying to like fine tune little different things that aren't going to matter much. So that effort is actually, it's not wasted, but that same amount of effort could have a bigger impact elsewhere. And so you might be missing it. And so my whole goal with this is to set a baseline of saying, okay, almost every recommendation I make has these components to it. Almost every place I go has these things wrong. And so let's make sure we have that covered first and then go on to the other things. In other words, that's the higher rate of return, is to spend the effort to make these things. And so these were all, as it turned out, almost all of them were things that don't really require a heavy amount of experience to be able to implement. A lot of these things are just kind of assumptions that people make that are bad assumptions. And so just getting around that, like we'd assume that Windows is, a fresh install of Windows is going to be well tuned. Well, that's completely wrong. Windows on its own is made to be able to handle whatever hardware it's put on, or whatever circumstance. So there's so many things about that. If you don't tune that properly, you lose a lot of performance when it comes to VDI, especially. So little things like that are things. So think of this like a checklist that happens to have some instruction along with it, that goes along with that. So that was the other part about this, is that I didn't want to have this be locked into version specific stuff. There's stuff that you can then that are applied to whether you're running just a little 50 seat farm in your closet, or 50,000 seats in Azure. A lot of these same concepts all apply. And so that was the reason I chose those ones to put in here. And so it was kind of like a curating everything. So initially what I did was actually do a bunch of lessons with people online. And that was out of that I said, okay, well, I'm already teaching this stuff. It's already there. And so I just took all those transcripts and everything like that, all the data, and just put it all into the book. And so that's how that came about. It's kind of crazy.
Well, it's funny that you say that about Windows, because people ask me about Stratodesk all the time too. They're like, so why Stratodesk OS? And it's important to understand, like you said, it's about optimizing the OS for the hardware. Microsoft has this issue where they develop this this package this big to fit into something that they only need for this, and that's the advantage of what we do. We target it towards what we're doing. It's if focused operating system for the target audience and the target use. And because of that, we can make it, cleaner, we can make it more secure, we can make it faster, smaller, all of those things that go along, with, deploying a great end user experience as well as making it manageable. So, and then the last thing I'm going to do, just real quick, we're coming up on the 30 minutes of our schedule, so we may run a little bit over. And I don't know if this was an intended part, but should we throw this open and say, does anybody have any questions? I mean, we've been sitting here babbling for 28 minutes.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's like that. I didn't know if we had any.
Did anybody want to ask any questions along the way? So,
yeah, feel free.
Well, if somebody wants to ask some questions, so like I said, it's that's the nice thing about the Stratodesk is ROS is so optimized for all the different variations of hardware. And I'm going to talk just for a moment, get everybody a chance to chat in if they want to. We can make the end user's experience as well as the IT administrator's experience, because we give the IT the ability to push a good desktop and a clean operating system that's fast and efficient and does what they need it to do easily, regardless of where it's at. Anyways, so I'm not seeing anybody throwing any questions in. I don't know. I don't think everybody's muted group-wise. So
yeah, what I'll do here is I'll throw up a link in the chat. We have a ongoing special for people that are on this webinar, or just for Stratodesk in general. So you just go to ctxpro.com/SDCH. So Stratodesk Citrix Hero. Pretty easy to remember. So that will actually get you a discount built in on the book. So feel free to do that. Yeah.
Well, awesome.
I'm not seeing any questions either. So
yeah, okay. Well, if nobody's going to have any questions, then DJ, again, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Yeah. And well, given the fact the weather's getting a little bit better, I'm sure we'll end up getting together here soon in the neighborhood. And appreciate your time today. And again, as always, thank you, and congratulations on 2 books last year. I didn't realize you'd done 2. I knew you had the 1. So somebody's asking, are you using the Microsoft RDP code in your product? So I'm going to guess that you're asking about probably for me, and that would be, are we using the Microsoft RDP product, not the Microsoft RDP product? Because again, we are an endpoint, so we do use the RDP protocol via the free RDP client. So I hope that answers your questioning. We'll give them a minute and see if anybody else has anything. So we shouldn't just boot people off just because we can. I mean, I've got another call here in 25 minutes, so I get a couple minutes if you want to hang out, DJ, just in case. But
yeah, absolutely, I can. A little bit of time. I think I have the same kind of. Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, to everyone, Microsoft RDP client.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, not using the Microsoft RDP client. Obviously, the Microsoft RDP client is for Windows. We do use the RDP protocol, though. So. All right, well, all right, looks like there's going to be no other questions. I suppose it's open source now. The free RDP is based on open source code, yes. So.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, as far as open, I don't know how open all that is, but at least the representation of what's necessary to connect is, yeah. So everything else is still very proprietary.
Et cetera, exactly. So, all right. Well, again, DJ, appreciate your time as always, and thank you everybody for attending and listening to us chat. And I'm sure we'll be get together again soon somewhere. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, DJ. Cheers.